All right, so in this chapter 4, we are going to focus on the reservation. So that's that pre-arrival stage of the guest cycle. So let's talk about first reservations and the sales. And so essentially what happens is a lot of the reservations are now automated because of our property management systems. And so now people can call the hotel directly, or they can make their reservations online. There's many different possible ways to do that because of that automation. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of reservations that we offer, as well as the different reservation methods. So the sales department is different from the general reservations that people call for. In the sales office, we deal with more of the groups, and so that might include corporate groups, and we're going to offer potentially a corporate rate. So for example, the airlines will sign a contract guaranteeing a certain number of rooms that they're going to use a year, and as a result, we as the hotel will offer them a specific agreed upon rate. Different companies like AT&T, USAA, HEB oftentimes have corporate rates. So as people travel from out of town, that's where they go to those hotels that have a corporate rate. For example, the La Quinta Inn and Suites, where I worked as a student, was right across the street from HEB's corporate headquarters. And so we had an $80 HEB rate. And the interesting thing about HEB rate was that anybody with an HEB name tag and a current pay stub could qualify for that HEB corporate rate. And that's negotiated in that contract. And so the person who is stocking the shelves at your local HEB, they could call and utilize that $80 HEB corporate rate. Trade associations, if we have groups that come in, different associations that come in that have trade shows or annual meetings or things like that, we are going to negotiate from the sales side both the reservations, the room rate, as well as any meeting space. The last one I want to talk about is the Smurf. And so Smurf is not a little blue person. Smurf is social, military, educational, religious, and fraternal. Okay, so any group that falls under that, social, military, education, religious, or fraternal, typically these are potentially nonprofit groups. They are groups that deal with typically limited budgets, and so oftentimes in a sales office, you'll have someone who's in charge for the corporate clients, the business travel. You'll have someone in the sales office who handles the trade associations. And then you also have someone in the sales office that handles the Smurf groups, okay? Depending on the size of the hotel. Each sales office has their goals that they have to meet, whether it's a number of rooms, a revenue goal, but they have their sales goals that they need to reach throughout the quarters, and then obviously throughout the year. So as we go through in the planning process, first, we want to look at the timing. So some groups book their meetings years in advance. Some groups, sometimes it's just a year. Sometimes it's just a very short period of short turnaround. So in the just a few months before or whatnot. And so with that, it's really important to understand. Remember, that's the concept we talked about in the last class when we talked about pace. So understanding what the pace is that we are booking our group travel and our group meetings. The way that a group affects our hotel is through occupancy and revenue. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing our revenue and that we are getting as close as possible to 100% occupancy. And so sometimes groups will ask for a large percentage of our hotel. And that's why it's really difficult sometimes for a smaller hotel that's 100 rooms or less to have large groups in house, because if they want 50 rooms, well, that's half of your hotel. And we'll learn in the revenue management course about how to look at the benefits if we have to displace our leisure travelers by accepting groups. And so we want to make sure that our transient versus our business mix, that's our business mix, is appropriate. San Antonio is very fortunate because we have a large transient as well as large business. And so hotels can identify what percentage of the mix of their guests do they want transient or leisure travelers versus the business travelers, and that can change throughout the year. So obviously in the summertime we might have more transient, less business. During the school year we might have during the week more business and less transient, and vice versa on the weekends. But working with the reservations working with the reservations manager, the director of sales will identify what is their allocation, what is their specific number of rooms they're allowed to sell for groups. And if they want to change that, or if they have a group that's asking for a specific number of rooms that's outside the allocation, that's above the allocated amount, well, then that needs to be approved either by the reservations manager, the revenue manager, or possibly the GM of the hotel. And so that allocation is very specific because that's going to relate back to the mix of what is allowed, because we don't want to necessarily always displace our leisure travelers by always accepting large groups. And so that's part of revenue management that we'll talk about later in the semester, as well as in the revenue management course. All right, so true or false? Group allocation refers to the maximum number of rooms the sales department can sell to groups. The sales manager can simply go over the group allocation amount whenever they feel like it. All right, so let's talk about the different types of reservations. So the two main types of reservations are guaranteed and non-guaranteed. Okay, essentially, what a non-guaranteed reservation is, a guest can call and make a reservation. If they do not use one of these 4 ways listed here under guaranteed, then essentially what we're saying is we're not going to guarantee that we have a room for you up until 4 o'clock. If you check in, then we can get you processed, and then at that point we're going to accept that method of payment. But essentially a guaranteed reservation means that there's some kind of method of payment already established, okay, to hold that reservation. I'm going to move from the left to the right. So one way is prepayment, and you can offer a prepayment, so the guest can prepay for their entire stay up front. I know oftentimes when I'm looking for my different rates through Hilton app, sometimes they offer a significant discount if I prepay. That's guaranteed revenue, okay? The issue with that is that most oftentimes prepaid reservations cannot be canceled. And so as a result, you have to make sure that you really are going to stay and utilize that. A lot of times resorts, especially during high volume or high occupancy periods, resorts will also require that prepayment. Payment card is just using a credit card or debit card to hold it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to charge it, but it just basically means that they're going to use that to hold your reservation, because if you do not cancel within the appropriate cancellation period, and then if you do not show up, well, then your card will be charged typically for 1 night's room and tax. And so that basically that is guaranteed that we're going to hold a reservation for you. So an example that I have with that, I once went to a New Year's Eve party, and my friends lived in condos that were right across the Riverwalk from the Hyatt Place on the southern part of the Riverwalk. And I had friends that were at the party, and they said, "Oh, we're staying at the Hyatt Place right across the river." And I said, "Oh, have you checked in yet?" And they said, "No, but we have a reservation, so we'll show up after the fireworks." Well, knowing that usually between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock is when we're trying to run our audit, I said, "You should probably call the hotel and just let them know you're going to be in there late." And they said, "Oh no, we have a reservation, so they're going to have to hold a room for us." And so as a courtesy to my friends, without them knowing, I called the hotel and I said, "Hi, this is David Uminsky. I'm a professor at St. Philip's College. I teach hotel management. I have friends that are here at a party right across the river, and they have a reservation." I gave them their name. I said, "They don't seem concerned about letting you know they're going to be in after midnight, but I, as a courtesy, just want to let you know that they will be there. It'll just be after midnight." And so the hotel was really thankful because, they could potentially think that they're going to be a no-show, right? If nobody's come in by midnight, they might be a no-show. And so if it comes down to somebody walking in and me giving my last room away, well, then what would happen if my friends walked over? And of course, they're going to be a little inebriated and probably maybe a little defensive if they don't have a room when they had a reservation. So that's one issue we want to work about. And that's with the payment card. We want to make sure that people understand that if they do not show up, or if there's a potential that we could possibly charge them for one room night's charge. Advanced deposit might be where we put down a specific amount, right? A percentage, or maybe we're a resort, we require the first night's room and tax up front, just to kind of have a kind of an advanced deposit. The corporate rate kind of goes back to that business rate we talked about. And so somebody might be able to call and say, "Hey, I'm with HEB," and if it is someone who is higher up in the company, then they might have an account with us. And so with that account, it might be in our accounts payable department section in our finance department, where we don't necessarily charge that account every single time somebody comes in, but maybe once a month or maybe every 2 weeks, we charge whatever's on that account, we charge to the company. We do what's called a direct bill. And so that's that corporate. That's that corporate guaranteed. So the main difference is that I'm guaranteeing that I'm going to hold a room for you. With the non-guarantee, usually it typically be about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If you have not arrived, then we're going to release that room back into our inventory. Okay, that way if we have a walk-in, we can actually sell that room to them. So which is not an example of securing a reservation? All right, it is the walk-in. That's somebody who just walks in off the street. They don't have a reservation. Which reservation type is preferred by hotels? What do you think? All right, it is that guaranteed reservation, because that way, if they do not show up or if they have not canceled, then we can charge that one night room and tax. We can guarantee that we have a method of payment on file to charge that one night room and tax. But also that guaranteed reservation helps us identify what type of workload do we need. If we have 50 arrivals coming in versus 10 arrivals coming in, then that tells us what we need to do to staff our front desk. And so the guaranteed reservations kind of help us predict what our workload and what our labor is needed and going to be. Reservations can be made in a variety of ways, true or false. All right, that is true. So what do you think are some ways that reservations can be made? Go ahead and hit pause and create just a short little list of different ways reservations can be made. All right, some ways that I'm thinking, obviously we can do websites. Now we can do applications. We can call directly. We also what's called our third party. Okay, so our online travel agents, OTAs. We can actually use an actual travel agent. Sorry, my handwriting is not so great. Our travel agents, we can use a corporate, oops, that's not right, hold on. We can use a corporate planner, which is kind of like a travel agent, but they work specifically for a corporation, for a business. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that we can make these reservations. Okay, so now as we, from the hotel side, as we are working with these reservations with the guests, so we're reservation agents, or the website is going to gather specific information. So now go ahead and hit pause again and create a list of information that's collected during the reservation process. Think about as many things as possible that you think would need to be collected during the reservation process. Again, remember, as much as we can do in this pre-arrival stage, it's going to help that arrival stage be much faster and much shorter at the front desk. It'll minimize their time at the front desk if we can collect as much information for the reservations. All right, so you have your list. Now let's take a look on the next slide and see how many match up. Do you have any that are similar? How many do you have that are different? So of course, we definitely want to have the guest's name. And if we're working with a corporate planner or a travel agent, we want to make sure we have the actual traveler's name. Okay, their address and email address and phone number. All that's going to give us information if we need to contact them in any way. Okay, if there is the company or the travel agency, if it's a travel agent, then that will help us identify if we have a specific commission rate that goes back to that travel agent, or if it's a company, we want to make sure that we note that whether or not they have a corporate account with us. And if they don't, and we see people coming from the same company over and over and over again, well, that might be a good lead for our business travel person to go after to secure future business specifically for that company. Of course, we definitely want the date of arrival and departure. So the check-in and check-out date, the type of rooms that are requested, and the number. So we know we in the last chapter, we went through a lot of different room types. Do they want a king? Do they want a double? Do they want connecting, or do they want adjacent rooms? So all these different things. Do they want river view? Do they want city view? We also have, when we're working with groups, we have what's called run of house. And so that essentially means whatever room is available when the guest checks in, that's the room that they're going to get. We also want to verify the room rate. And so now recently I went up to Dallas for Labor Day weekend, and I stayed at the Texican Court by Valencia Hotel Group. And I stayed Saturday night and Sunday night at the Texican Court, and I had two different rates. And so at the end, my reservation, I had a total amount, and it gave me an average room rate per night. It divided my total by 2 nights. But then when I actually looked closer, I could see that my Saturday night and my Sunday night were actually 2 different rates. And so we want to make sure that we verify what room rate is being offered at that particular time. Another example, back in 2014, I did a meeting in Dallas, and I was there for 12 days. And so I was in the Residence Inn for 12 days. And so during the week, I had specific rates. And then during the weekends, my rates increased, my rates changed. And so you want to make sure that you verify what that room rate is. We want to know how many people are in the party. What is the method of payment or guarantee? And so is it going to be a corporate rate? Is it going to be a payment card? Is this particular reservation required for prepayment, or is there a possibility to do a prepayment, a full payment in advance, and maybe we can knock $5 or $6 off of the rate? And so oftentimes when I'm making reservations through Hilton Honors and through the app, it will give me all of those rate options. It will give me the full rate, but then it'll give me the Hilton Honors discount. But then it might also, if it's available, give me a Hilton Honors prepayment discount. And so it shows you exactly what those discounts are. And then any special requests that we need, if they need it to be an ADA room, if they need it to be away from the elevators, or they need to be on a high floor or a low floor, all those special requests are necessary when we're making those reservations. All right, so different distribution channels. And the distribution channels is essentially how we get our product, which is our hotel rooms, how we get our products out to our guests, and how the guests can make reservations. Okay, so if they call the hotel directly, then that's that property. They might go through our website. They might call us directly. Now, the other one that is the more preferred, obviously calling the property direct is the most preferred because we get 100% of that revenue for that room. The other one is the central reservation systems. Okay, and so through those central reservation systems, they're going to charge us a small fee to process that reservation, but it's not going to be as much as the internet distribution or the global distribution systems. Okay, and so central reservation systems we've talked about in class, that has, like Marriott has a call center here in San Antonio, and so people will, it's a giant call center and people are making their reservations through there. They have access to the information about the property, so they can answer questions as best as possible. But if there are specific questions about the property and you want to be most detailed, then the property level is the best way to go to make your reservations. Now, the difference between global distribution, GDS, and internet distribution centers, we talked about that briefly in class. The GDS is primarily used for travel agents, utilize that, and it also deals with airlines, rental cars, all that stuff is connected to the global distribution system. The average person is going to use the internet distribution system, the IDS, and those are your third-party online travel agents like Expedia, Hotwire, and we'll talk about a little bit about those in just a few moments. So we have two different types of central reservation systems. One is an affiliate and one is a non-affiliate. And so an affiliate network essentially is a chain or a branded hotel. And so like Marriott or Hilton or Hyatt or Valencia Group. So there might be a central reservation system that can handle making reservations at a variety of properties, but all within that same brand, all within that same chain. Okay? The non-affiliate are independent properties. And so they can actually join things like the leading hotels of the world, preferred hotels and resorts worldwide, and distinguished hotels. They can join and pay to be a part of that. So that way, somebody can look at that specific place, that specific website, and it connects and brings together all the independent hotels. So one that I can think of off the top of my head here in San Antonio is the Hotel Emma. Hotel Emma at the Pearl is an independent hotel. It's the only one like it that's not part of a chain. And so they are part of these non-affiliate networks. They can pay to be part of that, connected on the web through this non-affiliate network that people can go to and look for a variety of different independent hotels, but they're going to a one-stop shop. The GDS, again, takes the worldwide inventory and connects it through the rental cars, the airlines, the hotels, other different services that are available, and it connects it to those travel agents, so those industry people that are utilizing that. And then lastly is, so when it comes to revenues that distribution channels bring in, obviously property direct is the most revenue, where we get the most revenue from those reservations. Okay, with the central reservation offices, whether it's the affiliate or non-affiliate, people have to pay a fee for that. And so there's a small fee generated because obviously you're paying for the service for somebody else to make a reservation for your hotel. It's usually based on a fee, whereas the GDS and the IDS is typically revenue that's paid back to those specific systems through commissions or other ways that they, the hotel will, the IDS or the GDS will charge a certain rate, and then the hotel just pays a commission back to the hotel or back to that system. And so all of that has been negotiated or contracted based on that option to be listed on those GDS or the IDS. Okay, and so it costs us money in order to post our inventory on those systems. However, it's almost like a necessary evil. So yes, we're not going to get 100% revenue for that room, but at the same time, so many people today are connected to their phones and to their laptops and their computers, and they're trained to go through these systems. And that's why we want to talk about, educating our guests to book direct. And we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of this chapter. So if a guest makes a reservation directly with the property over the phone for $100 for the night, the hotel would receive all $100. All right, that is true, and that is a type of the property distribution channel. So group reservations. Typically, group reservations are contracted, and so you might be working with a meeting planner, you might be working with an association planner, you might work directly with the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So you're working with somebody in order to negotiate a specific rate, and then you actually sign a contract because you're going to guarantee that you're going to fill what we call a room block. Okay, so a group of rooms. And so that person is going to deal with somebody in the sales office. And so they're not going to call up to the hotel and say, "Hi, my name is David. I'm with Association ABC, and I want to make a reservation for 25 rooms." Okay, and so typically then that person should transfer me to the sales office to start the negotiation process. We call that a block of rooms, okay? And so we're going to guarantee a room block, whether I'm going to guarantee 10 rooms a night, or if I'm going to guarantee 25 rooms a night, or I'm going to guarantee 200 room nights for the duration of this particular stay. And so we want to make sure that we are getting that contract, because if the group does not meet their room block, then there are fees called attrition that they have to pay, because they're going to guarantee we've set aside these specific rooms out of our inventory, and so now it's important that we actually can sell those rooms. If somebody is not able to satisfy their room block in the specific amount of time, then there are fees that are associated with that. And so when we are looking at rooms, they're in the room block in our property management system, in our reservation system, it's going to show that the room is the specific reservation is blocked. Okay, but as the guests are calling, whether they're using a rooming list where the meeting planner provides all names all at once, or if the guests actually call and make the reservations on their own and just say, "I'm with group Association ABC and I need to make a reservation for our meeting," then that room will go from a blocked to a booked status in the reservation system. The benefit of also doing a room block is that we can see, all I have to do is call and say, "I'm with Association ABC," and then I can go into my reservation system and I can see that the specific dates that are for that reservation. So it kind of helps speed up that process because we already know what the arrival and departure dates are. If the rooms are not met by a certain time, then we can release those back into our inventory by that cutoff date so that we can actually then resell them. Okay, and up to depending on what the cancellation policy is or the agreed upon rate in the agreed upon amount in the contract, then anything that we don't meet, the group does not meet, then they have to pay for those rooms. It's called attrition, and it is very real, and it's a way for us as the hotel to guarantee that when somebody calls and says, I want you to put 100 room nights on hold, that we actually know that we're going to get that revenue. So a predetermined number of rooms set aside for a group is called a room hold. True or false? All right, that is false. So creating a room block. So we want to make sure that before we even create that room block, that those rooms are available for that time period. And that goes back to communicating with the reservation manager, the revenue manager, or possibly even the GM, depending on the size of the hotel and the scope of the sales office. A lot of times hotels leadership will have weekly meetings or every other week meetings to make sure that we are keeping up with all of these different allocations and that they are current and up to date. We also want to make sure that we are not displacing too much of our transient or our leisure guests. Because you think about it, our leisure guests potentially can come back time after time after time for vacation or visiting family and friends. And so if we accept a group and we have a large percentage of our hotel rooms are taken up by groups, then that leaves a smaller percentage for our transient guests. Well, this group might bring us a lot of money right now for this large meeting, but these are people who maybe only come to us once every 3-4 years, or maybe once every other year. And so we have to balance, which one do we want? Do we want that transient guest that's going to come back time after time after time, or do we want this group that's only going to come back every other year? So it's a kind of a balancing game that we play. So we want to make sure that we are adjusting and checking that room block as people are making reservations, communicating with the association manager and say, hey, look, you've only filled up half your room block. Your meeting is 2 months away. You know, you either need to send out a blast and tell people they need to register or what. And so we want to make sure that we are being a good partner with our meeting planners to ensure that they understand where the pace of the pickup is for their room block. Okay. As somebody calls, we might put them in our books as a tentative group. Okay, we might pencil them in. So if we pencil them in, that means we can always erase them. But if we put them in pen in our books, right now, this is if you're using an actual book and a pen and paper, but now most everything is digitalized. And so we put them in as tentative. People cannot start making reservations until that status goes from tentative to booked, okay, or definite, sorry. So from tentative to definite. And what that basically means is when we have a definite group, that means they have actually signed a contract. We have a contract in place to identify what the room rate's going to be, what the deadline, what the arrival and departure dates is going to be, different things that go into a contract within the groups. So a tentative group has signed a contract, is ready to start making reservations to the room block. True or false? All right, that is false. It would be a definite group that has signed a contract. So let's talk about dealing with our convention groups. So first of all, we want to understand what the guest profile is, or what the group's profile is. And so how many room nights do they have? There's a term we call it is their peak night. So their peak night is going to be the night that they're going to utilize the most number of rooms. So is their peak night on the first night? Is it in the middle of the meeting? Is it the last night of the meeting? Also, what kind of food and beverage packages are being purchased by this group as well? Okay. Any kind of policies that we have, you're going to go over that with our meeting planner. So remember we talked about that commission rate, whether it's 1 for 40 or 1 for 50. So every 40 room nights or every 50 room nights, the meeting planner or the business itself is going to get 1 comped room. Okay, we want to make sure that they understand what all of our policies are. If they have an association like a trade show with their association meeting, what is the times that they can move in? What times can their vendors, what time can their exhibitors actually come in to set up? So I worked with a company called Adventures in San Antonio, and Mahindra Tractor USA was one of our largest clients. And so we went and did meetings all throughout the United States in the different regions, and then we did 1 annual meeting every other year. So typically during these meetings, the Mahindra USA was demonstrating to the local regional tractor owners, the store owners, about the maybe different models that were coming out or the different features. And so oftentimes we would roll up a tractor into the ballroom space. So is that even allowed? Some places did not allow that because of the weight of the tractors, and so we had to make sure we negotiated a parking lot right across the street, and that took additional permits with the city. So we want to make sure that what we want to do with our meeting is actually, the hotel is actually able to accommodate that. Okay, making sure that our list is up to date is the number of registrations. That could be, now the company I worked for, we handled all of that. But I also work with another organization called the Hospitality Educators Association of Texas, HEAT. And in that organization, we have an annual meeting, but everyone makes their own reservations. They call the hotel directly. So the hotel really needs to make sure that the room block is set up, and our association manager needs to make sure that that contract is signed before they start sending people to the hotel to make the calls and the reservations directly. Working with Convention and Visitors Bureau, so we have this term called a citywide. Okay, so a citywide meeting is one that requires more than 1 hotel. And so we might have large hotels like the Marriott River Center or the Grand Hyatt, and they have large ballroom space, and so some groups can actually accommodate everything in the hotel. They can have their sleeping rooms as well as all their meeting space there in the hotel. But then we have hotels that utilize the convention center, and they may have 20,000 attendees. Well, there's no one hotel that can house 20,000 people. And so as a result, we have what's called citywides. And so that's where the Convention and Visitors Bureau comes in and to assist the hotels in the area to make sure that they know what groups are going to be here. They can connect them with the meeting planner so that way the meeting planner can work directly with the hotels to negotiate those rates. Okay. With tour groups, okay, so for example, with tour groups, the Master Singers, San Antonio Master Singers, a group I sing with, we are going to London in the UK next year in 2020 in June and July to sing in a variety of places. We're going to sing in Scotland, Wales, and London. We've been to Italy, we've done Spain, we've done France, and so now we're going to the UK. And we are going as a tour. So there's 2 tour buses. There is about 90 travelers, I believe, between the 2 buses. And so the hotel, of course, the tour company is making all of these arrangements. And so we as travelers just pay the tour company to set everything up. And so we want to make sure that those cutoff dates are very clear. And so for us as the travelers, we have deadlines. We have to meet a specific amount of payments towards our trip because the tour company is making all these reservations, and they want to guarantee that they're not going to have any attrition. They want to guarantee that they are getting all that information to the hotels. Okay, and so we want to make sure that we also might have a rooming list. And so, for example, when we travel with the Master Singers, we typically do double occupancy. And so the same 2 people are basically roommates for the entire trip. And so as a result, we the tour company sends that list ahead to the hotel, and they can pre-program those keys. And so when we show up, everybody just comes in. The one person will go into the hotel. We all wait on the bus. We start getting our luggage, and then that person comes out with a stack of keys and just calls out the rooming list and hands those keys. And so it facilitates that process, and it doesn't necessarily tie up the front desk for the other guests that are staying in the hotel. They want to make sure there's any kind of advanced deposits required to secure their date. So again, we want to make sure that the travelers are staying up to pace with paying for their hotel or paying for the tour, so that we as the tour group can then pay the hotels. The hotels can collect those any kind of advanced deposits that are needed. Of course, any kind of special accommodations, if we're doing any food or beverage with the package of the hotel tour, we want to make sure that we have any dietary needs, we need any ADA requirements, things like that, to make sure that we accommodate the guests as best as possible. So attendee management and housing system software, this is a specific software that the group can utilize. They can make their reservations directly, or they can get those rooming lists to the hotel, and the hotel can utilize this software to make sure that we are managing the groups and the attendees appropriately. They're put into the appropriate rooms, like as far as if they're rooming together or if they're traveling by themselves. The other thing that that we can do with the attendee management and housing system software is we can look and see how much of the room block is still utilized and still needs to be utilized or still filled. So, as we're looking at reservations, we have a couple of different options. We can accept the reservation as requested. So somebody calls and says, I want a room for Saturday to Monday, and I want a king room with a river view. Okay, I can accept that just as requested. Or I can look at the dates and say, you know what, I'm so sorry. From Saturday to Tuesday, we only have city view rooms available. Is that okay? So we can suggest that alternate room type. Or if your date is flexible, we can offer you the Riverview room, but it would be the following weekend. Okay, and same thing with rates. And so we can give a rate, and if somebody says, you know what, I don't want to pay that much, then you might look in the system and say, well, maybe we can possibly look at this particular time period, and we can offer a discounted rate, a lower rate during this time period, a specific time period. An example of this, like oftentimes if you've ever booked on an airline or if you've booked online, sometimes they'll have actually a calendar of rates. And so that helps the people as they're making their reservations. They can look and see what the rates are for different days of the week, and they can make their selection based on that if they are price sensitive and have the flexibility to travel. Okay. One of the other good things about the third option is we can either recommend another hotel. That other hotel can be our next door neighbor. It could also be a situation like we're going to go to the Spring Hill Suites in Fairfield Inn and Suites. And so they're a dual property, meaning if Spring Hill is sold out, but I have rooms at the Fairfield, I can recommend that. But at the same time, it's still the same company, so I'm still going to maintain and keep that guest. So property management systems like Phoenix Hotel Group or Baywood Hotels, they operate a variety of different brands of hotels throughout the city. And so if one hotel is booked for a group or for transient, they can recommend one of the other hotels within their circle, within their organization. So they're still maintaining those guests without, and they're still going to get that revenue for that. So overbooking is common in our industry. It also depends on the time of the year. So during spring break, we may not want to overbook too much. We might go to 102%, maybe 104%, depending on the number of rooms we have in our hotel. But because obviously if it's spring break and we're oversold and we're sold out, then probably our neighbors are also going to be sold out. And so we can overbook because there's always that potential that somebody is going to cancel or no show. And so as a hotel, we want to make sure we're getting as close to that 100% occupancy mark as possible. And so with that, if we can oversell by like 2 or 3 rooms, then if we can look at our past data and see if, on this particular date, we had 3 cancellations. And so if we oversell our reservations by 3, then hopefully everything will balance out. Now, it is kind of a gamble because if nobody cancels, now we're oversold by 3 rooms. What do we do? Well, in that case, we're going to walk a guest, okay? That does not mean we physically walk them to the next hotel. It just means that we are going to pay for any transportation that's required. We're going to pay for their room night. We might give them some other types of commission in that process to kind of alleviate any kind of hard feelings for having been walked, okay? Because it is definitely an inconvenience for sure. A challenge with walking is that we might potentially lose that guest. They may go to that hotel and absolutely fall in love with that hotel, and now we've lost that guest as a lifetime guest. So it is like a challenge to balance, but of course we want to get as close to that 100% occupancy as possible. So with our systems, everything, as much as possible, can be automated is important. And so with that reservation system is part of our property management system. It's one of those systems within that property management system. And so we can always look at current up-to-date available rate. We can look at the current availability for specific room types. There's a lot of different things we can do if our reservation system is automated. In high demand periods, we can also create waiting lists. And so if we don't necessarily want to oversell our hotel, we might create a waiting list, and then if a room becomes available, we can call the first person on that waiting list. With confirmation and cancellation numbers, both are extremely important. Okay, so first, the confirmation number helps us look up the reservation. And that confirmation number, maybe they misspelled their name, and so we can't find their name when we type in just the name of the reservation. So that confirmation is definitely key. Now, the cancellation number is just as important, because remember we talked about those guaranteed reservations, and if somebody does not cancel within the appropriate time period, we can essentially charge them for a one-night room and tax. But if they call us back and say, you charged me, but here's my cancellation number, we can go back and look and verify that with that cancellation number that they indeed did cancel within the time period, and so we should not be charging them for that. So the cancellation number is just as important as the confirmation number. So with canceling the reservations, they need to call within that specific time period. Okay, usually it's 24 hours or 48 hours before that they can cancel the reservation with no penalty. If they don't cancel within that time period, then we either might charge a specific penalty, or we might, charge them a small percentage or the full room night's rate and tax. And so that's really important for the people that when you're making reservations, that they understand the cancellation policy. So a canceled reservation allows the hotel to return a room to inventory for possible resale, true or false. All right, that is definitely true. And so that's why it's important they cancel within that 24 to 48 hours, because if they cancel less than 24 hours in advance, well, then the chances of us reselling that room is pretty slim. So when canceling a reservation, it is not necessary to assign a cancellation number every time. All right, that is definitely false. So utilizing our reservation systems, we can look and see what our expected arrival and departure list is going to be. That tells us what guests are going to stay over, which ones are planning on departing. That helps us with staffing our front desk office, our front office. So with that, if we have a heavy checkout date, then we know we want to put a lot of people on in the morning. If we have a heavy check-in date, we want to make sure that we have a lot of people in the afternoon to accommodate for those. We also want to look and see what types of groups or people are actually expected to arrive. So if we are a tour hotel that deals with a lot of tour groups, in the morning we want to make sure that somebody is pre-keying all of those hotel rooms. And then when we went to New York in 2008 with the Master Singers, we actually checked in a completely different area of the lobby of this Hilton hotel. So it's a large hotel, large lobby. They actually took us away from the front desk to distribute the keys. And so that way it didn't necessarily bog down or clog up the front desk area of that hotel. And so we can look and see what that expected arrival and departure list is going to be. When we look at our histories, we might look and see what statistics we have on, during specific time periods, what our occupancy level was, what the guests were like, how many guests we had in the hotel. Did we have any no-shows, any walk-ins, any overstays or understays? So an overstay is somebody who stayed beyond their original departure date, and an understay is somebody who departed before their original departure date. We also might want to identify how were the reservations made. Did we have a lot of reservations from third-party online travel agencies? Did we have people booking direct? And so all of that is important information for us to track how we are booking our rooms. The other one is to identify how we can do better to attract a group that we're not necessarily already attracting. It also helps us identify the staffing again, or potential staffing when we're creating our budgets based on what we did in the past. That's called forecasting. All right, so of course, legal implications of reservations. We want to make sure that we are offering our guests rooms to everybody, that we're not turning people away when we actually do have rooms available, that we're not being discriminatory in nature. We also want to make sure that if somebody comes in with an ADA, a disability, that we have those rooms available. So oftentimes the ADA rooms are the very last rooms we're going to sell, because just in case we have a walk-in that someone requires that ADA, unless of course all of our reservations have requested an ADA room. If all of those are reserved and booked and somebody comes in and needs that, if we have someone's reservation on file that has not checked in yet, but they requested that, that's part of that guaranteed reservation. And so somebody walks in, we can let them know, unfortunately, we don't have any rooms that are ADA compliant at this time. Everything is completely sold out. And so that's something that we can do. Waiting lists we talked a little bit about, so we want to make sure we get their contact information so we can reach out to them if by chance something does come available. If we have promotional packages, that's also something that we can do. So oftentimes a package is basically 2 or more items put together, but they're paying one price. So as we are making reservations for promotional packages, we want to make sure that they understand that they're paying for the room, plus maybe a round of golf for 2 people or a spa experience for 2 people. And so we want to make sure those promotional packages are communicated to our reservation agents so that they can describe them appropriately, they can sell them appropriately, and the guests understand what they're getting when they do that. All right, different things that can happen during problems we can experience during the reservation is errors in the reservation record. So is their name misspelled? As they were typing it in, did they accidentally put in a number in their name or put an extra letter in the name? So we want to make sure that we update that if possible. Of course, if they booked through Expedia or an online travel agency, then we can't necessarily update that particular name because the OTA has them in their system under that particular name. But remember, the errors in reservation records we could potentially update if it's an email address or if it is a phone number or address. That industry jargon we talked about previously, the connecting, adjacent, and adjoining rooms. So there might be misunderstandings based on industry jargon. There also might be some miscommunication with the central reservation system. And so again, central reservation systems only have information available to them that's provided by the hotel. And so they're not directly on property. So there might be some miscommunications with that. Other online reservation failures. So one example I just utilized this past weekend at the Texican courts was I paid for a deluxe room, and the description in on the website said that a deluxe room is a room that is near the pool or the fire pits. And so when I checked in, I thought, well, my understanding is I'm going to be near the pool. My room was the furthest room possible from the pool. And so I was really confused at one moment. And so I went to the front desk and I asked, I said, I paid an additional $20 a night, so that's $40 extra plus the tax on my reservation that I'm paying, but I don't feel like I'm getting what I was anticipating because I was looking at staying near the pool. And then they explained to me that any room that has an exterior entrance, okay, so it's not within like a hallway, it actually opens out into the courtyard. So there's essentially two courtyards. The swimming pool was over here, surrounded by these buildings. And my room was right here. But there was a fire pit right here. And so, according to the guidelines and what was described, I was either close to the pool or a fire pit. So I was within the description, but it didn't make sense to me because I was focused on being close to the pool. And so once they explained that to me, and then also the fact that these were all exterior, they opened out into the courtyards. They also had different amenities in the room. So once that was explained to me, I was understandable. So connecting in adjacent rooms is a potential misunderstanding based on industry jargon. And that is true for sure. All right, so e-commerce is everything that happens via the internet. So let's talk about e-commerce very briefly. Of course, we have traditional distribution channels, the hotel reservation system, the call center, a global distribution system. But e-commerce allows hotels to access multiple distribution channels, those IDSs, okay, as well as direct because they can book directly through the website. It gives us a direct access to people, whether it's through our app, our website, or through an IDS or an IDS, really. So we have a couple different types of e-commerce. We have the merchant model, the wholesale model, and the opaque sites and transparent sites. So two different types. So let's talk about each one of these very briefly. So the markup model is what's called the merchant model. And essentially what happens is the online intermediary, which is the OTA, they negotiate a discounted rate for guest rooms that'll sell on its site. Okay, and then the discounted rate is called the net rate. And that represents the amount the intermediary will pay the hotel for every room it sells at the agreed upon rate. And so with that, essentially, what they do with the merchant model is the OTAs will actually rank the hotels based on their discount. And so the hotels that will give them the largest discount are going to be the ones that are going to be at the top of the list. Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm searching the OTAs, I probably don't go past the third group, maybe even the second group of hotels. And so if the hotels that are offering the larger discounts are up first, then people would potentially stay at those hotels more or be more apt to make reservations. The wholesaler model. With the wholesaler model, the hotel sets the selling price, and it basically gives the wholesaler commission based on that. Okay, so whether it's a 10% commission, 20% commission, 30% commission. Hotels like the wholesaler model because they have more control over their revenue, okay, the room price. And so whereas the other one, they're going to sell a room to that merchant model, and that merchant can sell it for whatever they want to sell it for. And so as a result, the hotels only get that specific amount, whereas in the wholesaler, it's based on the percentage on a commission. And so they still have more control over what the rate of their hotel is going to, their hotel room is going to go for. So with opaque sites, opaque essentially means you cannot see through it. So I kind of use this image down here on the bottom. It's like a brick wall. So Priceline and Hotwire are two examples. You're going to look at Priceline or Hotwire, you're going to guarantee you're going to pay $80 for a 3-star hotel. You don't know what the hotel is. You don't know where the hotel is. It might be downtown. It might be by the Riverwalk. It might be on the outskirts of downtown. You just don't know. And so they base it on the location. They also base it on the level of service. There's a lot of different things that they can do. But you don't get the actual information until you make the reservation and you pay for it. So an example, a few years ago, I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I used Hotwire to make my reservation. And so I just looked for a 3-star hotel, 4-star hotel, or whatever. I made my reservation, and then I got the name of the hotel and the address in the email as soon as I paid for the hotel. It worked out perfectly. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but this one in particular worked out perfectly because I ended up going to the opera that night that I was there at the last minute, and my hotel was right around the corner from the opera. So it was kind of really cool that it worked out. Sometimes people are not so fortunate. I book direct with the hotels, but when I used OTAs a lot, I often use transparent sites. So I use the imagery of a window, right? I can see through a window. I know exactly what brand I'm going to get. I know what level of service I'm going to get. And so with that transparency site, it helps people if they are brand loyal. You know, they can get a specific brand. If they want a specific site, they can actually then look at that hotel, and they can go over here and open up their maps, and they can look specifically where that map is, on the map where that hotel is. Something you cannot do with the opaque sites. So examples of our transparent sites include Expedia, Hotels.com, and Travelocity. So we can actually see what brands. So I would challenge you to go to these different sites and go to Hotwire and Priceline, and then you go to the other ones and you can see the difference between the opaque and transparency sites. So oftentimes now with the e-commerce trends is, people are now trained to go to those OTAs, and so now we're really trying to combat that because we lose revenue. We don't get 100% of that revenue. But at the same time, if the guest has an issue while they're on site, they come to the hotel. And so we're still dealing with those guest issues. If there's an issue with the reservation, oftentimes we have to then refer them back to their OTA where they made their reservations. And that could potentially appear negatively on the impression of the hotel from the guest perspective. Okay, most hotel brands, they offer a best rate guarantee. So if you book through them, you're going to get the best rate. We have a concept called rate parity. And so rate parity with technology now, whatever rate we have on our hotel site, we also should appear on the OTAs as well as that same rate. And so we want to make sure that the guests understand that they can book directly with us. One thing we can do is by offering those loyalty points. Now, I'm only going to get my Hilton Honors points. I'm only going to get my Marriott Bonvoy points or my IHG points. I'm only going to get those if I book directly with the hotel. I cannot get my Marriott Rewards points or my Marriott Bonvoy or my Hilton Honors points if I book through an OTA. Okay. We also do a lot of those different things, like we talked about complimentary Wi-Fi, different things that we can do to encourage people to book directly with us at the hotels. But now we even have, I can't remember what it is. I saw it recently a couple years ago, that I think Travelocity was, or Expedia was experimenting or implementing, every 10th night you stay for free. Every 10th reservation you make, you get that night for free. And so that was almost like them putting their toes in the water for the rewards system. So now it's still trying to entice people to keep using those OTAs. So Priceline and Hotwire are examples of transparent sites. True or false? That is false. Okay. One way to encourage potential guests to book directly is to offer loyalty points or rewards program. That is true. Which model is preferable to the hotels? It is the wholesale model. And then hotel websites are increasingly more sophisticated, and they make it easier for users to book online. That is definitely true. Okay. And even now people can book through their apps as well. So I hope you learned a little bit about the reservations process, and hopefully maybe this might make you think differently in the next time that you start making your reservations online as well.